Well, I feel a little bit like a fish from another bowl because we are not HR. I'm from an international organization with a completely different perspective. But I just wanted to start with an example about change. Almost 200 years ago, when electricity didn't exist, we only worked when there was daylight. When daylight was finished, work was finished, and we left for home. And then, electricity came, and then everything changed, and we were able to work all day long if we wanted, because we had light. And that was a change that brought a lot of changes and a lot of mindset changes. One of them is regulation. I am a lawyer, just to tell you that it's important for me. Law and regulation at some point is important. Not to put limits, but sometimes to understand. And one of the regulations was we cannot have the same person. If we are going to have an enterprise that works all day long, we cannot have the same person working all day long. And then we have the International Labour Organization, and the first convention is hours of work, so 100 years ago. Just to show that one change was important, but took a lot of time for adaptation. And do you hear me if I talk like that, or you prefer with the microphone? It's prefer with the microphone? Okay. What's important about this issue of change is how it happens. In our organization, we are celebrating this year the centenary. We are 100 years old. And in the framework of this celebration 5 years ago, there was starting a reflection about the future of work. And what are the impacts? What is changing in the world nowadays? And why are people talking all the time and everywhere about this change? And what came as a reflection about this change was an initiative that was called the Future of Work, where I worked. And what I am going to talk now is not so much the report that came out, but the reports that came in. For this initiative, a whole set of national dialogues took place. 110 countries participated in this initiative, and so we had the opportunity to have a lot of perspectives about the future of work. This is change, and this is the perception that we can have about change, something that happens and we do not know what to do. And I presented my first change about this electricity, and this was a change that took several lifespans, whereas the changes we are facing nowadays is we are in one life, and in one life we are facing a lot of changes. The difference is completely different. The difference is much bigger, radical, and quicker. So I think I will talk to you about, for example, phones. Many of us, not all of us, come from the time when television was black and white. And nowadays, we are watching TV in our phones. And we have artificial intelligence. And all these changes in only one lifespan. Whereas before, with the Taylorism, with electricity, there was many lives were taking place with only one change. So adaptation was easier. We didn't have this anguish, this desperation of this, what is going to happen with me? Am I going to be able to respond, to adapt myself to these changes? So I am going to talk in these 15 minutes about this, just to try and avoid this sensation of how am I going to cope? I am going to just fall in the water and be eaten by all these crocodiles. What about this automation, job displacement, technology, artificial intelligence, future of work? All these words, I think all these words didn't exist when we were kids. And we have to adapt. and what is going to come. That is what we are afraid about, that because that, we know already what it is. What is making us nervous is that we do not know what is coming next. So I am going to talk about three aspects that we saw from these national dialogues. Because we are here in Switzerland, and change and the future of work has a perspective. But it's not the same thing in Kenya, we were talking about that, or in India, or in Argentina, where I come from. We received reports when we asked the question, what is the future of work for you? We received reports about Denmark talking about this disruption committee, or Estonia talking about e-Estonia, e-government, everything is in the web, everything is in artificial intelligence, we're talking about the blockchain. And then we received the report from Japan and saying our society is aging. We do not know what to do. We might have robots taking care of older people. Okay, then change the mindset. Robots taking care of people. Coming from Latin America, it's almost unacceptable. Then we have Africa countries saying, future of what? We are in a survival mode. We do not know, some of the reports say, we do not know if tomorrow we are going to be alive, and you are talking about artificial intelligence, we cannot cope. But at the same time, we were just talking 5 minutes ago, M-Pesa. I don't know if you know what it is, the system of payment that was born in Africa. So that is coming, or has come here some years ago, but it was born in Africa. So we have all these dichotomies. So this is the global aspect, but just to talk to you that are more HR, this shows persons at the same time. We are not all the same. Respect the difference. What about change and how we perceive change? What about technology and how are all the persons that are working for me perceiving technology the same way? Are all the persons working for me or for whom I am working on, I'm constantly the same age? It is not the same thing, a young person or an older person. What about being afraid of technology? My daughters are not afraid of technology. I am completely afraid. Don't tell my mother that has to make her payments, her taxes payments only through internet, and for her, it was a disaster the first 3 times. So we have to adapt to that, respect this change, respect the fact that the perception of work has changed. We were talking just 5 minutes ago about entering in one company and coming out almost dead from that company and staying in that company all the time and developing our career there. And we have realized that this is not necessarily the case nowadays. For many people, because they are forced to quit, and for many people because they do not want to do that. Younger people want to enter and go out, enter and go out. But what younger people? All younger people? Because we had a meeting, our team of the Future of Work had a meeting with all HRs from big companies in France. And there was one of the HR that said, we are no longer providing training for youth. We are fed up. It was a lady, she said like that, we are fed up of providing training to youth. Because it was a retailing company, and they used very young people. So they were spending a lot of money providing training, people were entering, and then leaving for a year just to travel. But then another person says, yes, but my people are 30 years old. They are young, but they need stability. So the perception is different. Old people is different too. They are thinking about retirement, even more stability. So this issue of respecting the difference, respecting what we want, and respecting perceptions about what kind of career I want to develop. So how to harmonize the end interest of the companies with the interest of the person that are making the company. So that's one of the aspects. I am not bringing replies, I am sorry, I am just bringing questions and questions that we do not necessarily have answers for, or have several different answers according to the circumstances. The other one is lifelong learning. We have all talked, and I think here we are going to talk a lot about lifelong learning. This issue of permanent change is forcing us to permanently adapt. So we have already talked about, listened about this issue of soft skills. We are no longer, as we do not know what will happen, which jobs are going to be required. As the WEF said last year in its report, 65% of children at school age nowadays are not going to be working in a job that exists. The job they are going to be working doesn't exist yet. So what are we going to learn? We don't know. So everybody says, talks about soft skills or learning to learn. So there are aspects, because still we need the hard skills are needed because we want to be competitive. But we have to make a mix of these two things. But when I talk about this lifelong learning, I want to talk about three aspects: state, the enterprise, and the individual. And these three elements have to be in dialogue. Why? First of all, the enterprise is the one that brings the innovation. The innovation change, all the new possibilities are coming from the private sector. The great majority are coming from the private sector. But they need workers. And the workers, at all levels, from the highest levels to the lowest levels, they need workers. And these workers need to be trained. And this training starts at this youngest age. So there needs to be a dialogue between the states and the enterprises. And in some countries there is a permanent dialogue, so that enterprises say what kind of workers they need, how changes are coming, and what new profiles are going to be needed. Because what we know now is that the great majority of universities are training people for skills that won't be needed in the future. So this dialogue has to be very agile to adapt and very fluid between enterprises and the state. Then we need a dialogue between the state and the individual, because the individual needs time and money. Time to go out from the labor market to train, or to be in the labor market and train, but sometimes we need to go out. And money, because it is expensive to be trained. So what kind of system, what kind of grant, what kind of, might be a combination for unemployment and grants, credits are available between the state and the individual. Then the dialogue between the individual and the enterprise, because we have the best of the new technologies, but when they are implemented, they are not so good. And who is to know whether the technology is good or not, it works, what kind of twist we can give to this technology to adapt it to the need of the company? It's the worker, because it's the worker implementing this new technology. So for that, we need this dialogue. And a third dialogue is the individual with the individual himself, because he or she needs to know what they want for the future. And I have 3 girls, some know because we're nervous. And what I see in the youngest is they are nervous because they have a whole lot of possibilities. So this is creating a lot of stress, because they do not know, they have so many possibilities, and I am talking about Switzerland, might be big cities. I am not talking about countries that are in survival mode. When we are in survival mode, we have to work wherever we can just to feed our family. But in countries where there are a lot of possibilities, young people need guidance, because they do not know really what to do. So this dialogue with themselves, learn to know what they want to do and what are the means that are available for them. And the last element I'd like to talk about is human in command. And I think you are going to talk about that, is the aspect of the human. In fact, we're talking about technology, and we're talking about all these possibilities that technology is bringing, big data, artificial intelligence, automation, having robots taking care of other people, making operations, chirurgical operations, distant chirurgical operations, things like that. But who is the latest destinatory of the destination of all this movement? It has to be the human being. And sometimes we are forgetting about that. We are forgetting when we have mechanisms where we have robotics, for example, for care, or when we have artificial intelligence to take the most important decisions without human participating in that. And there are reflections about that. I think this is part of the fears that we have, that we lose this control of this technology that can do so many things that are great, but at some point there needs to be a reflection on how we are going to do that. And as an example, or as elements that have to be taken into account, one is transparency, how decisions are taken. People need to know how decisions are taken. But at the same time, and it seems contradictory, privacy. Of all this information that we are putting in the systems, at some point we need to control ourselves, to have the control of our own data. And there are some regulations at European level, but limited effect, and they work only at European level. And then this issue of human in command and accepting diversity. And for that, I give an example with the issue of automation or artificial intelligence and the human resources and artificial intelligence. We could use another example, but for here is human resources. But for example, it applies the same with automation and judicial decisions. We need to be very careful not to perpetuate bias and discrimination, because artificial intelligence feeds itself from past decisions. And if in past decisions we were biased and we were just guided, or we were adopting certain decisions, if we are not taking voluntary decisions to avoid this bias is going to be perpetuated. So that are my ideas. I hope I've been in the time.
Yes.
But well, the most important message for me is human in command on all this interesting.
Thank you very much, Marta. And more inspiration and reflection for us to be in command of our own reflection, bringing more of the human that we are, our capacity, our talent, and technology has be, something that supports and help us to go further.